The girl from the Deathworld. Yuna sat at the back of the xenolinguistics classroom and tried not to fall asleep. The professor, a thin blue creature with 4 arms and a voice like a broken radio, was explaining the grammar rules of the Pelian trade language. Yuna already knew them. She had studied them on the shuttle ride to the station 6 months ago, because she had nothing else to do during the 14-day trip. The classroom was large and curved, built into the outer ring of Orbital Station 14. Through the wide window behind the professor, stars moved slowly as the station rotated. 30 alien students sat in rows of smooth white chairs. Most of them were taller than Yuna. Some had scales, some had fur. One in the front row was basically a floating cloud of gas held together by a magnetic belt. None of them sat within 3 seats of her. Yuna was human, and humans came from Earth, and Earth was classified as a Category 7 Deathworld. In the Galactic Union database, Earth was described as a planet with a toxic oxygen atmosphere, extreme temperature shifts, high gravity, active tectonic plates, dangerous predators on every continent, and a dominant species that had evolved by chasing other animals until those animals died of exhaustion. The entry ended with a simple warning in red text that said beings should avoid direct physical confrontation with humans under all circumstances. Yuna was 5'4" and weighed 53 kilograms. She liked sweet rice cakes and quiet mornings, but the database did not mention any of that. The class ended, and Yuna packed her tablet into her bag. She walked out into the corridor, a long white tunnel that curved gently upward in both directions. Students moved around her in a natural flow, and she noticed, as she always did, the way they gave her space. Not obviously. Just a slight widening of the gap, a small lean away, like water flowing around a stone. She was used to it. "Yuna, wait up!" She turned and saw Taeho jogging toward her. He was tall and thin, with messy hair and a crooked smile that never seemed to leave his face. He was one of the 5 humans on the station, and the first one who had talked to her. That had been on her 2nd day. He had sat down across from her in the cafeteria, put his tray down and said, "You look like you need a friend more than you need personal space." He had been right. "You looked like you were dying in there," Taeho said, falling into step beside her. "The class is slow. Everything here is slow. These species have lifespans of 300 years. They are in no hurry." He grinned. "Lunch?" The station's food systems could produce almost anything from base proteins and nutrients, but the result always tasted slightly wrong, like a copy of a copy. Yuna got a bowl of something that was supposed to be rice porridge. It was close enough. Jiwon and Sujin were already at their usual table in the corner. Jiwon was a year older than Yuna, broad-shouldered with short hair and serious eyes. His father had been a military officer back on Earth, and Jiwon carried himself like someone who had grown up around discipline. He was studying xenobiology, but Yuna sometimes thought he was studying the station itself, watching how it worked, where the weak points were, who was in charge of what. Sujin sat beside him, eating something green and leafy. She was on the medical track, quiet and focused, with steady hands and a calm voice that made people trust her immediately. She was Yuna's roommate, and probably the closest thing Yuna had to a best friend on the station. "Where is Doha?" Yuna asked. "Lower decks," Taeho said. "Doing Doha things." Doha was the 5th human. He was pale and thin, and rarely came to the upper levels of the station. He spent most of his time in the maintenance corridors and storage bays of the lower decks, where he ran a small data trading operation. He could find any file, crack any lock, and erase any record. The station security had tried to catch him twice, and failed both times. Doha was not dangerous. He was just invisible, and in a place like this, that was its own kind of power. Lunch was quiet and easy. They talked about classes, about a new species that had enrolled at the academy, about a rumor that the station was going to add a new gravity gym. Normal things, small things. They made the station feel less like a foreign place, and more like somewhere she could belong. After lunch, Yuna went to the cargo bay on the lower ring for her daily training. She had found the place in her first week. It was large, mostly empty, and had adjustable gravity plates on the floor. She set them to Earth standard, which was higher than the station default, and began her routine. Stretches first, then running along the perimeter, then Hapkido forms. She moved through the strikes and joint locks with the kind of smoothness that came from years of practice. Her father had taught her when she was young. He had said that a person who knew how to move their body never needed to be afraid. She trained for an hour, until her shirt was soaked with sweat and her muscles burned in a way that felt good. Then she cooled down, drank water, and started walking back toward the dormitory wing. That was when she saw them. She was passing through Corridor 9, near the restricted docking bays that were used for official and military ships. The corridor was empty. The lights were dimmer here, set to a low blue tone. A heavy door on her left was labeled Bay 7 in Union Standard script. It was supposed to be locked. It was open. Through the gap, Yuna saw a ship she did not recognize. It was dark, angular, and ugly, built for speed and violence rather than comfort. And walking down its boarding ramp were 5 figures. They were tall, easily 7 feet, with dark green scales and long arms that ended in clawed hands. They wore armor that was matte black and covered in scratches and dents. One of them, the one in front, had a deep scar running across the left side of his face, cutting through where an eye had once been. He stopped at the bottom of the ramp and looked around the docking bay with the slow, careful gaze of a predator checking new territory. Yuna stepped back into the shadows of the corridor. Her heart was beating faster. She did not know what species they were. She did not know why they were here. But something old and deep inside her, something that had kept her ancestors alive on the plains and in the forests of a world that tried to kill everything on it, told her one thing very clearly. Those were hunters, and they were not here for cargo. She turned and walked away quickly, keeping her footsteps quiet. Behind her, the door to Bay 7 slid shut with a soft hiss, and the corridor was empty again, as if nothing had happened at all. The contract. The ship smelled like blood and old metal. Gorath stood in the center of the briefing room and looked at the 4 hunters sitting around the table. They were his team. He had picked each one of them himself over the years, chosen them for their speed, their silence, and their willingness to do ugly work for good money. They had hunted across 9 systems together. They had taken down creatures that most species would not even look at. They had never failed a contract. This one would be no different. The target is a human female, Gorath said. He tapped the display panel on the table, and a holographic image appeared. It showed a young woman with dark hair and a calm face. Student identification records, name, age, class schedule, dormitory assignment, everything they needed. She is 19 standard years old, Gorath continued, studying at the academy on this station. She is healthy and physically active. The client wants her alive and undamaged. The payment is 400,000 Union credits upon delivery. One of the hunters, a younger one named Voss, leaned forward. 400,000 for one small female. What is so special about her? She is human, Gorath said. From the Deathworld, Earth. The room went quiet for a moment. Every hunter in the galaxy knew about Earth. It was the planet that produced beings who could survive almost anything, who healed from wounds that would kill most species, who could run for hours without stopping, who ate both plants and meat, and sometimes things that were poisonous to everything else in the galaxy. Humans were rare outside their home system. Collectors paid fortunes for them. The client is a private collector on the far rim, Gorath said. He has a menagerie of rare species. He wants a human to add to it. Young, healthy, female. That is what we are delivering. What about station security? Asked another hunter, a tall one with a missing finger on his left hand. Handled. Gorath brought up another file. It showed the image of an insectoid alien in formal clothing. Director Palax. He runs this station. He has been paid to cooperate. He will disable cameras in the target's corridor tonight, jam local communications in that section, and order security to stand down if any alerts are triggered. He has given us the target's schedule and dormitory location. We have a clean window between the end of evening classes and the start of the night cycle. 2 hours. 2 hours is more than enough, Voss said with a low, clicking laugh. Gorath did not laugh. He never did before a hunt. Do not underestimate the target because she is small or young. She is a Deathworlder. Their species has a threat rating of 8 out of 10 in the Union Combat Index. They are stronger than they look, faster than they should be, and they do not stop fighting when they are hurt. They keep going. She is a student, Voss said, not a soldier. On Earth, there is no difference, Gorath replied. Every human is a soldier. They just do not all know it yet. He shut off the display. We move tonight. Standard formation, quiet approach, shock weapons only. The client wants her alive. If she resists, subdue her, but do not kill her. A dead human is worth nothing. The hunters nodded and began checking their gear. 2 levels above them, in a bright office overlooking the station's central garden, Director Palax sat behind his desk and tried to stop his hands from shaking. He was an insectoid, thin and angular, with compound eyes that reflected the light in hundreds of tiny fragments. He had been the Academy Director for 11 years. He had a reputation for fairness and efficiency. He had awards on his wall and letters of praise from the Union Education Council. None of that mattered now. What mattered was the debt. Palax had made bad investments. A failed mining venture in the outer systems had eaten through his savings and left him owing money to people who did not accept apologies. When the offer came through an encrypted channel, he had read it 3 times before responding. Disable some cameras. Provide a student file. Look the other way for 1 night. In exchange, enough money to clear his debts and start over. He had told himself it was not so bad. The human girl would be taken to a collector, not killed. Humans were tough. She would survive. She might even be treated well. Collectors valued their specimens. He told himself these things, but his hands still shook. In the cafeteria that evening, Yuna sat with her friends and could not eat. She pushed her food around her plate and stared at the table. You have been quiet all day, Sujin said from across the table. I saw something last night, Yuna said. She told them about the ship in Bay 7, the tall, scaled figures, the armor, the way the one in front had looked around like he was sizing up the territory. Tejo frowned. Could be anything. Diplomats, traders, military inspection. Diplomats do not wear scratched armor, Yuna said. Jiwon set down his drink and looked at her with those serious, steady eyes. What bay did you say? 7. He pulled out his tablet and opened the station's public docking records. He scrolled through the entries for the past 48 hours. Bay 1 through 6 were all logged. Bay 8 and 9 were logged. Bay 7 was blank. There is no record of any ship docking in Bay 7, Jiwon said quietly. Every docking is logged automatically. Unless someone erased it, Jiwon said. They all looked at each other. Tejo stopped smiling. Sujin put down her fork. The cafeteria noise continued around them, dozens of alien students talking and eating, but at their table, the air had gone still and heavy. I will talk to Doha, Jiwon said. He can check the system from the inside. An hour later, Jiwon came back with Doha. Doha looked the same as always, pale and thin, with dark circles under his eyes, and a tablet that never left his hands. He sat down and spoke without looking up. Someone wiped the docking log for Bay 7, professional job, but they missed a backup fragment in the maintenance subsystem. A ship docked there 2 days ago. No registration number, no origin tag. The file was erased within minutes of docking. Who erased it? Yuna asked. The deletion command came from an administrator account. Director level. Silence. There is something else, Sujin said. Everyone looked at her. She was pale. I was doing my medical rotation today and I noticed something strange. Yuna, your biometric file was accessed yesterday by an external query. Someone outside the medical system pulled your health records, your physical stats, everything. Yuna felt cold. Not the kind of cold that came from temperature, the kind that came from understanding. Someone brought hunters to this station, Jiwan said. His voice was low and flat. And someone gave them your information. Why me? Yuna asked. Because you are human, Jiwan said, and humans are rare, valuable, and far from home. Yuna looked at her hands on the table. They were small, they did not look dangerous, but she could feel her heartbeat in her fingertips, steady and strong, and somewhere behind her ribs, something old and patient was starting to wake up. What do I do? She asked. You be careful tonight, Jiwan said, and you do not walk alone. But that night, after evening class, the corridors of Section 11 were empty. Yuna walked alone because her class had run late, and Taeho had not answered his comm. The lights were dimmer than usual. Her footsteps echoed off the white walls. Then the lights flickered. Then she heard clawed footsteps behind her, heavy and slow and getting closer. Yuna did not look back. The hunt begins. Yuna ran. Not in panic, not in blind fear, but with purpose. Her feet hit the floor in a steady rhythm, and her breathing stayed controlled. In through the nose, out through the mouth, just like her father had taught her. Humans were not the fastest creatures on Earth. They were not the strongest, but they could run longer than anything else alive, and they could think while they ran. That combination had made them the most dangerous species on a planet full of dangerous things. Behind her, the clawed footsteps broke into a sprint. The hunter was faster in a straight line. She could hear him closing the distance, each step a sharp click against the metal floor. The corridor stretched ahead of her, long and white and empty. No doors, no turns, no cover. She reached the end and turned left, then right, then left again. She had walked every corridor, explored every maintenance hatch, mapped every shortcut in her mind, during 6 months of quiet, lonely evenings. The hunters did not know this station. They had a map on a screen. She had the map in her bones. The maintenance shaft entrance was a small panel in the wall at knee height. She dropped, pulled it open, and crawled inside without slowing down. The shaft was narrow and dark, filled with pipes and cables. A human could fit through it. She was not sure the hunters could. She crawled fast, moving on her elbows and knees, ignoring the pipes that scraped against her shoulders. Behind her, she heard the panel being ripped off the wall. A large body forced itself into the shaft. He was following her. He was too big for this space, but he was doing it anyway. Yuna reached a junction where the shaft opened into a small maintenance room. She pulled herself out and stood up. The room was tiny, barely 3 meters across, filled with electrical panels and a single overhead light. She grabbed a heavy wrench from a tool rack on the wall and pressed herself against the wall beside the shaft opening. The hunter came through head first. He was enormous up close, his green scales slick with effort, his yellow eyes adjusting to the light. He saw her too late. Yuna did not hesitate. She could not afford to hesitate. She swung the wrench into the side of his head with everything she had. It connected with a sound like a hammer hitting wet stone. He staggered, but did not fall. His kind were tough. Their skulls were thick and layered. He reached for her with one clawed hand. She ducked under it, grabbed his outstretched arm with both hands, twisted her hips, and executed a Hapkido joint lock. The technique used his own weight and momentum against him. His elbow bent the wrong way, with a crack that echoed in the small room. He made a sound, not a scream, more like a deep grating hiss of shock. His shock baton had fallen from his belt during the crawl. Yuna picked it up, flicked it on, and drove it into the soft scales under his jaw. The weapon discharged with a sharp buzz. His body went rigid, then limp. He did not get up. Yuna stood over him, breathing hard. Her hands were shaking. The wrench was still in her other hand, spotted with dark fluid. She looked at the body on the floor and waited for the guilt to come, the horror, the shock. It did not come. What came instead was clarity, a cold, clean focus that settled over her mind like snow falling on water. She was not safe. There were more of them. They had jammed her comms and killed the lights and sealed off her corridor. This was a planned operation, and the thing on the floor was only the first. She took the dead hunter's belt. It had a knife, a small flashlight, and 2 more shock baton charges. She clipped it around her waist, left the maintenance room, and kept moving. The cargo bay was her territory. She had trained there almost every day for 6 months. She knew every shelf, every container, every gravity plate on the floor. She knew which ones were set to high gravity for heavy cargo and which ones were turned off. She knew where the chemical storage lockers were and what was inside them. When she reached the cargo bay, she did not feel like she was running. She felt like she was coming home. 2 hunters were waiting inside. They had predicted she would come here. They stood in the center of the bay, weapons drawn, scanning the shadows between the stacked cargo containers. They were professional. They covered each other's blind spots and moved in coordinated patterns. But they did not know about the gravity plates. Yuna crept along the upper walkway that ran along the bay's ceiling. She moved in silence, watching them below. One of them stepped onto a section of floor marked with a faded yellow stripe. That was the high gravity zone, 3 times Earth standard, meant for pressing heavy cargo flat during transport. She reached the control panel on the wall and activated it. The gravity plate hummed. The hunter on it dropped to his knees instantly, then flat on his face. 3 times standard gravity meant that his own body weight tripled in a heartbeat. His armor, which had been light and comfortable, now crushed down on him like a slab of stone. He tried to push himself up and failed. His arms shook and gave out. He could not breathe. The second hunter spun toward the control panel and saw Yuna on the walkway above. He raised his weapon. Yuna was already moving. She grabbed a cargo strap hanging from the ceiling, swung out over the bay, and let go. She fell 10 feet and landed on the hunter's back with both feet. Yuna rolled off, came up with the knife from the dead hunter's belt, and ended it before he could recover. Then she walked to the first hunter, still pinned under 3 gravities and struggling to breathe. She looked down at him. He looked up at her. His yellow eyes were wide and full of something she recognized. Fear. He was afraid of her. She crouched beside him and studied his face. Somewhere in the back of her mind, a voice said this was wrong, that she should feel something, that a normal person would feel something. But Yuna was not a normal person. She was a human, a product of a world where everything wanted to kill everything else. And she had been pushed into a corner by creatures who wanted to put her in a cage. She did what her world had taught every living thing on it to do. She survived. 2 left. Meanwhile, 2 levels up, Tejo was slamming his hand against the communications console in the hub where he worked. Every channel in Section 11 was dead. Not just offline, but actively jammed. Someone was running a signal blocker in that section. Military grade. Something is wrong, he said. Jiwan was already beside him. He had come to the hub when Yuna did not answer her comm after class. His face was hard and set, the expression of someone who had grown up around soldiers and knew what a tactical blackout looked like. That is a targeted jamming pattern, Jiwan said. Someone is hunting in that section. Yuna is in that section. I know. Jiwan pulled out his personal tablet and opened a channel to Doha on the lower decks. The connection was weak, but it held. Doha, Section 11 comms are jammed. Yuna is there. I need you to break through or find another way to reach her. I am already working on it. Give me 10 minutes. Taeho looked at Jiwon. We cannot just sit here. We are not going to, Jiwon said. He opened a locker behind the console and took out a heavy flashlight and a maintenance tool that was basically a metal bar. Not much, but better than nothing. Sujin, are you on this channel? Sujin's voice came through from the medical wing. I am here. Get the medbay ready. Off the books. No records. There was a pause. Then Sujin said, Understood. She did not ask why. She already knew. Back in the cargo bay, Yuna wiped the knife on her sleeve and checked the exits. Her ribs ached from where she had landed on the second hunter. There was a cut on her forearm that she did not remember getting. Blood ran down to her wrist, worn and red, and she thought it was strange how calm she felt. She was not finished. She knew there were 5 of them. She had counted 5 on the ramp in Bay 7. 3 were down. 2 were left, including the one with the scar, the leader. He would be the most dangerous one. She moved toward the door and stepped into the corridor. The lights were still dim. The station was quiet around her, as if the entire place was holding its breath. Then she heard it. Slow, heavy footsteps, coming closer. Not running, walking. The steady, patient walk of a predator who was not in a hurry because he believed his prey had nowhere to go. Yuna tightened her grip on the knife and waited in the dark. The Deathworld girl strikes back. Yuna stopped running. She found a dark corner behind a row of cooling units in the lower maintenance corridor, pressed her back against the wall, closed her eyes, and breathed. Her heart was pounding. Her arm was bleeding. Every muscle in her body wanted to keep moving, to run, to flee, to put as much distance between herself and the danger as possible. She told her body no. Running was what prey did. Running was what the hunters expected. They had designed this whole operation around the idea that she would panic, that she would bolt like a frightened animal, and they would close in from multiple directions and take her down. 3 of them had already learned that she was not what they expected, but the pattern was still the same. She was still reacting, still letting them choose when and where the contact happened. That was going to change. Yuna opened her eyes and made herself think. She was in the lower ring of the station. She knew every part of it. She knew that the hydroponics wing was 2 corridors to her right, a large open space full of plant rows and growth tanks. She knew that the environmental controls for that section were accessible from a service panel near the entrance. She knew that the cooling systems for the entire lower ring ran through pipes overhead, carrying refrigerant that could drop the air temperature to well below freezing if it was vented directly. And she knew one more thing. The hunters were reptilian, cold-blooded. Their bodies depended on external heat to function. If the temperature dropped far enough, their muscles would slow, their reaction times would collapse, and their brains would fog over. They would become helpless. She was not going to run from the 4th hunter. She was going to prepare a place for him and let him come to her. She moved quickly through the maintenance corridors to the hydroponics wing. The room was long and green, filled with rows of alien plants growing under soft purple lights. Water dripped from irrigation lines overhead. The air was warm and humid. She found the environmental service panel behind a wall cover near the main entrance, opened it, and studied the controls. Coolant lines ran through the ceiling. There was a manual release valve for emergencies, meant to flash cool the room if the plants caught fire. She loosened the valve and left it ready to turn. Then she moved to the far end of the room and made noise. She knocked over a growth tray. It crashed to the floor with a loud, wet sound that echoed through the corridor outside. Then she crouched behind a row of tall, leafy plants and waited. She did not wait long. The 4th hunter came through the door, with his weapon raised and his head turning side to side. He was careful. He had probably heard what happened to the others on his comm before the signal went dead. He knew she was dangerous. But he was still here, still hunting, because that was what he was trained to do, and because he believed that in the end, one human girl could not stand against a professional killer. He moved into the room, stepping between the plant rows, scanning with a thermal sensor on his wrist. Yuna watched him from behind the leaves. He was getting closer. 15 meters. 10. 7. She reached up and turned the valve. The coolant hit the air with a hiss that sounded like a giant snake. White fog poured from the ceiling vents and rolled across the room in thick waves. The temperature dropped so fast that frost formed on the leaves around Yuna's face within seconds. Her breath came out in clouds. Her skin burned with cold. But she was human. Her body could handle it. Her blood was warm. Her muscles would keep working, even as the cold bit into her skin. She would pay for it later with pain and stiffness. But right now, in this moment, the cold was her weapon, not her enemy. The hunter felt it immediately. He stopped walking. His movements became stiff and jerky, like a machine running out of power. He tried to raise his weapon, but his arm moved too slowly. His legs locked. His jaw opened, but no sound came out. The cold was shutting him down, organ by organ, muscle by muscle. His thermal sensor beeped wildly, flashing red warnings that his core temperature was dropping below survivable levels. Yuna walked toward him through the fog. Her arms were wrapped around herself, and her teeth were clenched against the cold, but she walked steadily. She stood in front of him and looked into his yellow eyes. They were still aware, still watching her, but the body around them had stopped obeying commands. She ended it quickly. She was just thorough. Then she turned the valve back and let the room warm up again. She stood there shaking, rubbing her arms, feeling the cold slowly leave her bones. 4 down, 1 left. 2 levels above, Taeho had finally broken through the communications jam. Not by overpowering it, but by rerouting his signal through the station's external antenna array, bouncing it off a relay satellite, and back into the internal network on a frequency the jammer was not covering. It was messy and the audio was bad, but it worked. He contacted station security. The response made his blood go cold. All security operations in Section 11 have been suspended by order of Director Palax, the officer on duty told him. There is a controlled drill in progress. No intervention is authorized. Taeho stared at the screen. There is no drill. Someone is trying to kill one of our students. I have my orders, sir. Taeho cut the channel and looked at Jiwon. Jiwon's face was tight with anger. A controlled, focused anger that did not explode but hardened into something useful. Palax is part of this, Jiwon said. What do? We deal with him later. Right now, we help Yuna. Doha's voice crackled through the comm. I found something. Payment records. An encrypted transfer from an off-world account to Director Palax's personal finances. 400,000 credits. The sender is linked to a known collector on the far rim. Someone paid Palax to give up a human student. Jiwon closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them, they were hard as stone. Copy everything. Every record, every file, every transaction. Back it up somewhere Palax cannot reach. Already doing it, Doha said. In the lower ring, Yuna was moving through the corridors toward the airlock junction near Section 12. She had chosen this place deliberately. The airlock junction was a wide room where 2 main corridors met, with a heavy emergency airlock door on the outer wall. The airlock was used for cargo transfer and emergency evacuation. It had a manual override panel and safety rails bolted to the walls and floor. She stood in the center of the room and waited. She did not hide this time. She did not set a trap. She just stood there, in the open, under the cold white lights, and let the last hunter find her. Gorath came through the corridor entrance and stopped. He looked at her from across the room. His one good eye moved over her, taking in the blood on her clothes, the knife in her hand, the cuts and bruises on her arms. Then his eye moved to her face, and what he saw there made him tilt his head. She was not afraid. "You killed my hunters," he said. His voice was deep and rough, like gravel being crushed. "They were trying to take me," Yuna said. "It was nothing personal. A contract. Business. It is personal to me." Gorath drew his blade. It was long and curved, made of a dark metal that did not reflect light. He held it with the comfort of someone who had used it many times. "You are impressive for a small creature, but you are tired and hurt, and I have been doing this for 30 years. Yuna said nothing. She adjusted her grip on the knife and shifted her weight to the balls of her feet. He came at her fast, much faster than the others. His blade cut the air in a horizontal arc aimed at her midsection. She stepped back and felt the wind of it pass across her stomach. He followed with a downward strike. She dodged left. The blade hit the floor and threw sparks. She tried to get inside his reach, to use her speed and small size to get close where his long arms were a disadvantage. He read it and drove his knee forward. It caught her in the ribs and sent her sliding across the floor. Pain exploded through her side, hot and sharp. She tasted blood. She got up. Humans always got up. He came again. She ducked, rolled, and slashed with her knife. It caught him across the thigh. He did not slow down. His blade came around in a backhand sweep and opened a cut across her ribs, shallow but long, and the pain was like fire. Yuna stumbled backward until her back hit the airlock control panel. She felt the buttons against her spine. She looked at Gorath. He was walking toward her, blade raised, certain of his victory. She reached behind her and hit the emergency cycle button. The airlock door behind her blew open. The room screamed as air rushed toward the vacuum of space. Everything that was not bolted down flew toward the opening. Gorath's eye went wide. He dug his clawed feet into the floor, but the force was too strong. His body slid. He grabbed at the floor, at the walls, at anything. Yuna had wrapped her arms around the safety rail the moment she hit the button. She held on with everything she had, her fingers white, her shoulders burning, her body stretched toward the void like a flag in a storm. The wind tore at her clothes and her hair and tried to rip her away. Gorath reached for the rail. His claws scraped against the metal. For one moment, his eye met hers. She saw something in it that she had seen in the other hunter's eyes. Fear. Real, animal fear. His grip failed. The vacuum took him. Yuna hit the cycle close button. The airlock door slammed shut. The wind stopped. Silence returned, heavy and sudden, like a door closing on a storm. Yuna slid down the wall to the floor. She was bleeding from her ribs and her arm, and a dozen smaller cuts she could not feel yet. Her body shook. Her vision blurred at the edges. Footsteps, running footsteps, human footsteps. Sujin reached her first. She dropped to her knees beside Yuna and pressed her hands against the wound on her ribs. "I am here," she said. "I am here. Stay with me." Taeho and Juwon arrived seconds later. Taeho's face was white. Juwon looked around the room, at the blood on the floor, at the closed airlock, at the scratch marks on the metal where Gorath's claws had dug in. "It is done," Yuna whispered. Her voice was thin and far away, but no one can know. Juwon looked at her, then he nodded once. H1. Erasing the proof. H1. Sujin worked on Yuna's wounds in a storage room on the lower deck that had been converted into a makeshift medical station. She had brought supplies from the medbay in a bag. the kind of supplies that would not be missed from inventory. Wound sealant, antibacterial gel, stitching thread designed for human tissue, pain medication that she injected into Yuna's arm with steady hands. Yuna sat on a metal crate and stared at the wall while Sujin stitched the long cut across her ribs. The pain was distant now, dulled by the medication and by something else, a deep exhaustion that went beyond the physical. Her body was shutting down the emergency systems it had been running all night. The adrenaline was fading and leaving behind it a hollowness that felt like an empty room after a storm. "The rib wound is deep but clean," Sujin said. "No organ damage. You will have a scar." "Good," Yuna said. Sujin paused and looked at her. "Good? I want to remember." Sujin did not ask what she wanted to remember. She finished the stitching in silence and wrapped the wound in a thin, flexible bandage that would be invisible under clothing. Then she cleaned the cuts on Yuna's arm and hands, and treated the bruises that were already turning dark purple across her ribs and back. "You need rest," Sujin said. "Not yet." In the corridor outside, Jiwon and Taeho were standing over the body of the first hunter, the one Yuna had killed in the maintenance room. Taeho looked like he wanted to be sick. Jiwon looked like he was doing math in his head. 5 bodies, Jiwon said. 4 on the station, 1 in space. The one in space is not our problem. He is gone. The 4 here need to disappear. "How do you make 4 bodies disappear on a space station?" Taeho asked. "The same way everything disappears on a space station. Out the waste port." Every station had a waste ejection system. Solid waste, broken equipment, and damaged cargo were loaded into sealed pods and launched during scheduled debris purges. The purges happened twice a week. The next one was in 6 hours. Taeho ran his hand through his hair. "We are really doing this." "We are really doing this," Jiwon confirmed. "Taeho, I need you to check the purge schedule and make sure the pods we use are not flagged for inspection." "Can you do that from the communications hub?" "Yes." "Then go. I will handle the bodies." Taeho left. Jiwon looked at the dead hunter on the floor and took a slow breath. Then he bent down, grabbed the body under the arms, and started dragging it toward the cargo bay. He was strong, but the hunter was heavy, easily 130 kilograms of dead weight in armor. It took him 20 minutes to move the first body. By the time he had all 4 lined up in the cargo bay, near the waste loading port, his shirt was soaked through, and his arms shook with fatigue. He stripped the armor off the bodies, and separated it. The armor went into one waste pod. The bodies went into another, double-sealed. He labeled both pods with standard waste codes that would not attract attention. Meanwhile, Doa was in his workspace in the lower decks, surrounded by screens and cables, and the quiet hum of systems he had wired together himself over the past year. His fingers moved across 3 keyboards at once. He was doing the most important job of all. He was erasing everything. The cameras in Section 11 had been disabled by Palix before the hunt, so there was no direct footage of what had happened. But the station had overlapping systems, motion sensors, bioscanners, power usage logs, air quality monitors that recorded changes in oxygen and carbon dioxide levels. Every one of these systems had recorded small pieces of what had happened that night. Alone, each piece meant nothing. Together, they told a story. Doha erased that story. He went through every system one by one. He found the motion sensor data that showed movement in the corridors during the lockdown period and replaced it with default empty readings. He found the bioscanner logs that had recorded 5 unknown life signs in Section 11 and deleted them. He found the power spike from when Yuna had activated the gravity plates in the cargo bay and buried it in a routine maintenance log. He found the airlock cycle record and overwrote it with a standard test cycle that would not raise questions. He worked for 4 hours without stopping. When he was finished, he ran a full audit of every system on the station and checked for anything he might have missed. He found 2 fragments in a backup cache and deleted them. Then he deleted the deletion logs. Then he cleared the system cache that recorded the deletion of the deletion logs. When he was done, there was nothing. No trace of the hunters, no trace of the fight, no trace of anything unusual happening on the station that night. As far as every system on Orbital Station 14 was concerned, it had been a perfectly normal evening. The hunter ship was still in Bay 7. Taiho and Jiwon handled it together. They boarded it, disabled the ship's internal recording systems, and set the navigation computer to autopilot. The destination was an empty point in deep space, far from any shipping lane or patrol route. They corrupted the navigation log so that even if someone found the ship, they would not be able to trace where it had come from. Then they launched it. The ship slid out of Bay 7 and into the black, accelerating silently until it was just another point of light among billions. It would drift for years, maybe forever. No one would look. Back on the station, Yuna changed her clothes, washed the blood from her hands and face, and went to her dormitory. Sujin was already there, sitting on her bed, pretending to read a medical textbook. Neither of them spoke for a long time. "Are you okay?" Sujin finally asked. Yuna thought about the question. She thought about the sound the first hunter's arm had made when it broke. She thought about the fog in the hydroponics wing and the frost on the leaves. She thought about Gorath's eye, wide and frightened, in the moment before the vacuum took him. "I will be," she said. She lay down on her bed and stared at the ceiling. Sleep came slowly, in pieces, and her dreams were cold and full of corridors. 3 days later, Director Palak sat in his office and realized something was very wrong. The hunters had not contacted him. Their ship was gone from Bay 7. There were no messages, no reports, no confirmation of capture. He checked his systems and found nothing. No records of the ship, no records of the hunters, no records of anything. It was as if they had never existed. He was still sitting at his desk, staring at a blank screen, when the door opened and Jiwon walked in. Jiwon did not knock. He closed the door behind him and stood in front of the desk with his hands in his pockets. Palax looked at him. His compound eyes reflected the office lights in hundreds of tiny nervous fragments. "Can I help you?" Jiwon took a small data chip from his pocket and placed it on the desk. "On this chip are the encrypted payment records showing that you received 400,000 credits from a private account linked to a collector on the far rim. There were also communications between you and the hunting party, your authorization to disable security in Section 11, and the deletion order you issued for the Bay 7 docking log." His hands folded together on the desk. They were trembling. "You will resign your position within the month," Jiwon said. His voice was calm and even, without anger or threat. He was simply stating facts. "You will recommend a replacement who is favorable to human students. You will never speak of what happened. You will never contact the collector again. If you do any of these things, or if anything happens to any human on this station ever again, these records go to the Union Council. You will spend the rest of your life in a penal colony." He paused. "Nod if you understand." Palax nodded. Jiwon turned and left the office without another word. Weeks passed. The station returned to its routine. Director Palax announced his resignation, citing personal reasons. A new director was appointed, a calm, elderly being from a neutral species who had a reputation for fairness and a genuine interest in cross-species education. The 5 human students were offered improved dormitory assignments and priority scheduling. No one asked why. Yuna went back to class. She sat in the back of the xenolinguistics room and took notes. She ate lunch with Taeho, Jiwon, Sujin, and Doha. She trained in the cargo bay every evening, moving through her Hapkido forms with the same smooth precision as before. Except now, there was something different in the way she moved. something sharper, something that had been tested and not found wanting. The scar on her ribs healed into a thin, pale line. She touched it sometimes when she was alone, tracing it with her fingertip, like reading a sentence written on her skin. One morning, a new group of students arrived at the academy. They were from different species, different worlds, different systems. One of them, a tall, thin herbivore with wide eyes and nervous hands, was assigned to the seat next to Yuna in her xenolinguistics class. He sat down carefully, keeping his elbows close to his body, and glanced at her sideways. After a few minutes, he leaned over and whispered, "Excuse me, is it true what they say about Deathworlders?" Yuna looked at him. She saw the fear in his wide eyes, the same fear she had seen in every alien face since she arrived on the station. But she also saw curiosity. She saw a person trying to understand something he had been taught to be afraid of. She smiled, a small, warm, genuine smile. "Do not believe everything you hear," she said. The herbivore relaxed. His shoulders dropped. He smiled back, a shy and grateful smile, and turned to face the front of the classroom. Yuna turned back to her notes. Under the desk, her knuckles were still faintly bruised. Somewhere out in the deep black of space, a dead ship drifted with no crew, no log, and no destination. Somewhere on the far rim, a collector waited for a delivery that would never come. And somewhere in the files of a resigned director, there was a gap where records had once been. A gap that no one would ever think to look for, because the girl from the Deathworld had made sure there was nothing left to find. The class began. Yuna picked up her pen and started writing. Outside the window, the stars turned slowly, cold and bright and endless, and they kept every secret the darkness gave them.